Ethan stood at the edge of the busy marketplace, his eyes scanning the crowd of aliens. The galactic trade hub was alive with people from all corners of the galaxy, their voices mixing in a hum of chatter. He was just a human soldier on a short leave, hoping to grab some food and explore the strange world he'd landed on. He had no idea that today would change his life forever. As he walked through the market, he noticed something strange. A group of alien soldiers were arguing fiercely with an older merchant. The argument escalated quickly, and before Ethan knew it, one of the soldiers shoved the merchant, sending him tumbling to the ground. The crowd around them gasped, and some even stepped back in fear. Ethan's instincts kicked in. "Help!" He rushed forward, grabbing the soldier by the arm and pulling him away from the merchant. The soldier turned, eyes flashing with anger, and Ethan stood his ground. "Back off," Ethan said, his voice calm but firm. The alien soldier growled, but before he could do anything, something unexpected happened. A soft voice spoke up, clear and calm. "Please, leave him alone." Ethan turned and saw a woman standing just a few feet away. She was unlike any alien he had ever seen. Her skin was a soft shade of violet, and her large, expressive eyes seemed to shine with an otherworldly glow. She was tall, slender, and had an air of quiet dignity about her. Her long, dark hair flowed behind her like a river of silk. The soldier hesitated for a moment, his anger fading slightly at the woman's words. He snarled, but ultimately stepped back. The woman nodded in Ethan's direction, a small but grateful smile appearing on her lips. "Thank you," she said softly, her voice carrying an almost musical quality. "I did not expect someone to intervene." Ethan shrugged, feeling a bit awkward. "I couldn't just stand by and watch. Are you okay?" She nodded, but her gaze lingered on him a moment longer than necessary. "I am Lyra," she said, her eyes studying him with an intensity that felt strange. "And I believe we owe each other a debt now." Ethan blinked, unsure of what she meant. "A debt?" "Yes," she replied. "You saved me from a confrontation. Customary for my people to show gratitude in a way that may seem unusual to you." Ethan furrowed his brow, not sure where she was going with this. "What kind of custom?" Lyra stepped closer to him, her eyes serious but gentle. "Where I come from, we have a sacred ritual practice of closeness and bonding. It is called the cuddle. It is a way of showing trust and connection between individuals. It's not something we share lightly." Ethan blinked in confusion. "A cuddle?" He wasn't sure if he had heard her right. Like hugging. She nodded. "Yes, but it is much more than that. It is a sacred act. It binds two souls together, creating a deep connection. It is our way of showing that we trust each other completely." Ethan felt his face flush. He was pretty sure he was hearing her wrong, but the sincerity in her eyes told him she was serious. He chuckled nervously. "I think you're messing with me," he said, trying to ease the tension. "I'm not sure that's really my thing." Lyra's expression didn't change. She reached out and gently touched his arm. "I understand that this may seem strange, but for my people, it is an important ritual. If you are uncomfortable, I will not force it. But know that I feel a connection between us, and I wish to share this with you." Ethan was caught off guard. He had been on many different planets, met many aliens, but never had someone so openly shared such an intimate custom with him. He could see how much it meant to her, and there was something about her that made him want to help her, even if he didn't fully understand. "Okay," he said slowly. "I'll give it a try." Lyra smiled warmly. "Thank you," she said, and then, without another word, she gently wrapped her arms around him. The softness of her body pressed against his, and he couldn't help but feel a strange warmth spread through him. It wasn't like anything he had expected, but as they stood there, wrapped in this embrace, something shifted inside him.
Right there
Was a deep sense of calm, like everything around him was fading away, leaving just the two of them. When they finally pulled apart, Lyra's eyes glowed softly. "This is a bond now," she said, her voice serious. "It is not something that can be undone." Ethan stared at her, unsure of what to say. The feeling of her touch lingered on his skin, and something about her words stuck in his mind. He hadn't expected any of this, but there was no denying that he felt different. "Okay," he said again, his voice quieter this time. "I guess we'll see where this goes." Little did he know, this was only the beginning of an unexpected journey. That would change everything he knew about trust, connection, and the mysterious ways of the galaxy. Ethan stood there, still trying to process what had just happened. The soft touch of Lyra's arms around him had been something entirely unexpected. And the strange feeling of warmth it had left behind was unsettling in a way he couldn't describe. He glanced down at his hands, still feeling the faint tingling. From the embrace, the more he thought about it, the stranger it seemed. But as Lyra pulled away, there was something about her calm, peaceful smile that made him reconsider his discomfort. Lyra stood in front of him, watching him carefully. Her eyes were filled with patience, as if she were giving him time to understand something very important. He could tell that she wasn't going to let go of this so easily, "This is a thing for your people?" Ethan asked, trying to keep his voice steady, though he was still feeling unsure of the situation. Lyra nodded, her violet eyes gleaming with sincerity. "Yes, for my people, the cuddle is not just a physical gesture. It is a way of connecting with others on a deeper level. It symbolizes trust, safety, and a willingness to be vulnerable. In our culture, we don't share it with just anyone. It's something sacred." Ethan couldn't help but raise an eyebrow. Sacred? I mean, I get that it's important to you, but how is a hug sacred? Lyra smiled softly, her expression gentle. It's not just a hug. It's a ritual that binds two souls together. It is said that the closer we are to another being, the more we can understand them. Through this ritual, we share more than just a physical space. We share our thoughts, feelings, and memories. It helps us connect with each other in ways words cannot. Ethan stared at her, trying to wrap his mind around it. He had never encountered an alien species with such a deep spiritual approach to something as simple as physical touch. It was hard for him to understand how something as ordinary as cuddling could carry so much weight. Still, he couldn't deny the genuine sincerity in Lyra's eyes. She wasn't joking, and he could tell she wasn't trying to make him uncomfortable. On purpose. "Look, I'm not exactly from a culture that does something like this," Ethan said slowly. "So I don't really understand it. But, I guess I appreciate you showing me trust like that." Lyra nodded, as though she expected him to feel this way. "I understand. Humans have their own ways of connecting, and that is important too. But for my people, this is how we form bonds. It is how we ensure that we are not alone in the universe." Ethan felt a strange pang in his chest. He didn't know why, but the way she spoke about not being alone hit him harder than he expected. He had always been used to being independent, to handling things on his own. But here, standing in front of him, was someone who believed in something deeper than just survival. Someone who believed in connection. "I don't know if I'm ready for all of that," Ethan said, a little unsure of how to express what he was feeling. I barely know you. I've only just met you today." Lyra's expression softened, and she stepped closer, her presence calming. "I understand. There is no rush, Ethan. The ritual is not about forcing something. It's about offering something, about allowing yourself to be vulnerable and letting the other person know that you are here for them, no matter what." Ethan couldn't help but feel a little guilty. Here she was, offering him something so meaningful, and all he could do was feel confused about it. But there was something about Lyra that made him want to at least try to understand. "So, what now?" Ethan asked, looking at her in confusion. You said this is a sacred ritual, but you're just going to expect me to..." Lyra chuckled softly, shaking her head. "No, I'm not asking you to accept it right away. This is something that will come in time. I just wanted you to understand why it means so much to me." Ethan nodded, still processing everything she had said. He couldn't shake the feeling that Lyra had shown him a side of herself that was so different from anything he had ever experienced. There was a kindness in her that seemed to reach beyond the galaxy's chaos, something that felt almost otherworldly. "Well," Ethan said, trying to break the tension with a smile, "I guess I can't deny that was an interesting way to meet someone." Lyra laughed, her eyes sparkling. "Yes, I suppose it's not the usual first encounter. But sometimes, it's the unexpected moments that shape us the most." As they walked through the marketplace, Ethan kept glancing at Lyra, trying to make sense of everything that had happened. He could still feel the gentle pressure of her arms, around him, and his thoughts were full of questions. How could something as simple as a hug mean so much to her people? Was it really possible for something so ordinary to carry such weight? But despite his confusion, there was a part of him that felt strangely connected to Lyra. She had shown him a side of the galaxy he had never seen before, a side where connection and trust were the most imperfect things. And as they continued walking, he couldn't help but wonder if this strange ritual, this sacred bond, might be the key to something deeper. "I'll think about it," Ethan said, finally feeling like he could breathe again. "Maybe. I'll give it a shot when I'm ready." Lyra smiled at him warmly. "Whenever you're ready, Ethan. No pressure. Just know that I'm here, and I trust you." As they walked off together into the busy market, Ethan couldn't shake the feeling that something had shifted in him. Whatever lay ahead, he knew one thing for certain: this encounter with Lyra was only the beginning of something far more profound than he could have imagined. Ethan sat at a small cafe in the market, sipping on a drink that he couldn't quite name, surrounded by the strange hum of alien voices and the smells of unfamiliar foods. His thoughts were still tangled with the events of the past few days, particularly Lyra and the strange ritual she had introduced him to. He had spent the last few hours walking through the bustling market, trying to shake off the unease that had settled in his chest since their first encounter. He hadn't meant to let the situation get under his skin. It was just a hug, right? But the more he thought about it, the more it seemed like something much bigger than that. The feeling of Lyra's arms around him kept coming back, and with it, a strange sense of calm that he couldn't ignore. As if on cue, Lyra appeared beside him, her violet eyes bright with that same calm presence he had come to associate with. Her? She had a soft smile on her lips, and for a moment, Ethan forgot all the confusion swirling in his mind. "Ethan," she said softly, her voice like music in the noise of the market. "I'm glad you agreed to join me for lunch." Ethan forced a smile, still not sure how to act around her. "Yeah, well, you said it was important to you, so ... She smiled wider, the kindness in her eyes reaching him. "Thank you. It means a lot to me that you're giving this a chance." He shifted uncomfortably in his seat, trying not to look too flustered. "Not that I'm against the idea of the ritual, ... It's just, I don't know. I mean, I've never had someone insist on such a thing before. And now, I guess it's hard to figure out what comes next." Lyra nodded, understanding his hesitation. "I understand, Ethan. Our customs may be strange to you, but they are a way of showing trust. I can't force you to accept it, but I'm not asking for anything more than what you're willing to give." Ethan rubbed the back of his neck. "I guess that's the part I'm stuck on. What does it even mean? You say it's about trust, but is it just about hugging? What if we're not ready for ... more?" Lyra's expression softened as she sat across from him. "It is not just about the physical touch, Ethan. The cuddle creates a bond that goes beyond that. It is an act of emotional openness, of saying, I am here for you in a way that cannot be easily broken. My culture, we don't take it lightly. It means we are connected, that we share something valuable with each other." Ethan felt a heavy weight settle in his chest. The more she spoke, the more he realized that what he had thought was a simple gesture was actually a lot more significant than he had imagined. "I'm not sure I'm ready for that kind of connection," Ethan said, his voice quiet. "It's a lot. I mean, I don't even know you that well." Lyra's gaze was gentle, and she nodded in understanding. "I know, Ethan. I'm not asking you to rush into it. But I want you to know that I trust you, and when you're ready, I'll be here." The bond isn't something forced, something that grows over time. As she spoke, Ethan realized that Lyra wasn't just looking for a simple gesture. She was looking for something more, something deeper. The bond she was talking about wasn't just between them, it was a connection that would shape their relationship in ways he couldn't fully understand yet. "I just don't know if I'm cut out for that kind of bond," Ethan admitted, his voice tinged with frustration. "I've spent most of my life alone, always on my own terms. This whole being connected thing, it's not something I've ever really considered before." Lyra's eyes softened, and she reached across the table to gently touch his hand. "I understand. But I believe we all need connection, Ethan. Whether we admit it or not, we are not meant to live in isolation. And sometimes, the hardest thing to do is open up to another person, but in the end, it can be the most rewarding. Ethan pulled his hand back, feeling a rush of emotions he wasn't prepared for. The idea of being vulnerable, of letting someone in, made him uncomfortable. He had never been good at relying on others, always carrying the weight of the world on his own shoulders. But Lyra's words struck a chord with him. She wasn't asking for anything grand, just trust. As they finished their meal, Ethan couldn't shake the feeling that things were changing. Slowly, but undeniably, the connection between him and Lyra was deepening. She had opened up to him in a way that no one had before, and despite his hesitation, he found himself wanting to understand her world more. After lunch, Lyra stood up and offered him a hand. "Come, I want to show you something." Ethan hesitated, then took her hand, following her through the market. He didn't know what she had in mind, but there was something about her that made him want to trust her. They walked in silence, past rows of alien vendors and towering buildings, until they came to a quiet garden hidden among the chaos of the city. It was a peaceful place, full of lush plants and the sound of birds that didn't quite sound like anything he'd heard before. Lyra stopped by a stone bench and motioned for Ethan to sit. "This is where my people come to meditate," she explained. "It's a place of peace, where we can clear our minds and connect with each other, or just with ourselves." Ethan sat down, feeling the calm of the space wash over him. He looked around, taking in the beauty of the garden. There was a quiet serenity here that he hadn't felt in a long time. "Do you meditate?" Lyra asked, sitting beside him. He shook his head. "I've never really gotten into it."
Lyra smiled, her voice soft.
"It's a way to clear the mind, to let go of everything that weighs us down. It helps me think clearly." Ethan thought about what she said. Maybe he needed to let go of some of the weight he'd been carrying. Maybe there was more to this connection with Lyra than he had initially thought. As they sat in silence, began to feel the stirrings of something deeper, a sense of understanding, even if he didn't yet fully grasp it. Whatever came next, he knew this connection with Lyra was far from over. Perhaps, just perhaps, was the beginning of something he had been missing all along. Ethan's thoughts were a whirlwind as he left the peaceful garden with Lyra by his side. The calm atmosphere had given him a moment of clarity, but it hadn't answered the questions swirling in his mind. Every step he took felt heavier, like his feet were sinking into the ground. The connection he felt with Lyra was undeniable, but so was the unease that followed him everywhere. He had never been the type to open up to anyone. Over the years, he'd learned to rely on himself. It was easier that way. No one could let him down, no one could hurt him. But now, with Lyra, things felt different. She was patient, kind, and persistent in ways he didn't understand. And yet, the closer she drew him in, the more he pushed back. "Are you okay?" Lyra's voice broke through his thoughts. She was walking beside him, her eyes searching his face for signs of what he was feeling. "You've been quiet since we left the garden." Ethan didn't know how to explain the storm. In his chest, "Not sure," he admitted, running a hand through his hair. "I've never felt so... connected to someone. But I'm not sure I know what that means. And it scares me." Lyra stopped walking and turned to face him. Her gaze was soft, but there was something intense in her eyes that made him feel like she was looking straight through him. "You're scared of the bond between us?" she asked, her voice gentle but filled with understanding. Ethan hesitated. He wanted to say yes, but the truth was more complicated than that. It wasn't just the bond, it was the idea of opening up to someone, letting them see the parts of him he'd kept hidden for so long. "I don't know how to do this," Ethan said quietly. "I've spent most of my life alone, doing things my way. And now, with you, I feel like I'm supposed to be something different, but I don't know how to be that person." Lyra stepped closer to him, her presence calming and reassuring. "It's okay to be uncertain, Ethan. There's no rush. The bond doesn't change who you are. It just allows you to share who you are with someone else. You don't have to be someone you're not." Her words hit him harder than he expected. He'd always believed that he had to be strong, that he had to have it all figured out. But here, in this moment, Lyra was telling him that it was okay to be vulnerable, that he didn't have to be perfect. I'm just not sure I'm ready to let someone in, he admitted, his voice low. I've always kept people at a distance because I didn't want to get hurt. Lyra's expression softened, and she reached out to gently touch his arm. I understand. Trust is difficult, especially when it's been broken before. But the bond between us isn't about perfection. It's about learning to trust again, one step at a time. Ethan closed his eyes, feeling the weight of her words. He had never let anyone in, not really. And now, with Lyra, it felt like he was standing on the edge of something he couldn't control. The fear of falling, of being hurt, was always there, lurking in the background. But there was something else too, something that made him want to try to take that step even if it scared him. I don't know how to let go of that fear, Ethan said quietly. I've carried it with me for so long, and it's hard to just ... let it go. Lyra said softly. It's okay to take things slow. We don't need to rush. We have time. Her words felt like a balm to his soul, and for the first time in a long time, Ethan felt a flicker of hope. Maybe. He didn't have to have all the answers right now. It was okay to be uncertain, to let himself be vulnerable as they continued. Walking through the city, the noise and chaos of the market seemed to fade away. Ethan's mind was still racing, but it felt different now, less like a storm and more like a calm before the rain. He wasn't sure what was coming next, but he knew that for the first time in a long time, he didn't have to face it alone. Over the next few days, Ethan found himself thinking about Lyra more and more. She was everywhere, her soft smile, her understanding eyes, the way she seemed to see right through him. It wasn't just the ritual that had brought them together. It was the way she made him feel seen, heard, and understood in a way no one else ever had. Yet despite his growing feelings, for her, Ethan still couldn't shake the fear that was always there, lurking beneath the surface. It was one thing to feel a connection, but it was another to actually act on it. What if he let her in, only to have her leave? What if he was making a mistake, found himself at the same cafe again, the place where he and Lyra had talked so many times, had become their spot, a place where they could sit together, away from the chaos of the world. But today, Lyra wasn't with him. Instead, Ethan sat alone, lost in his thoughts. The door to the cafe opened, and he looked up to see Lyra walk in. She smiled when she saw him, and something inside Ethan shifted. He wasn't sure what it was, but in that moment, he knew. Fears he had, whatever doubts he carried, they weren't enough to stop him from wanting to be with her. Hey, Lyra greeted him, her voice warm and inviting. Ethan smiled back, a little unsure of himself but feeling something he hadn't felt. In a long time hope, Hey Lyra, I was just thinking about ... well, about us. She sat down across from him, her expression patient. What are you thinking? To trust. To let you in, even if I'm scared. Lyra's eyes brightened, and for a moment Ethan thought he saw something more in her gaze, something like relief. Thank you, Ethan, she said softly. We don't have to do everything all at once. Just take it one step at a time. As they sat there together in that quiet cafe, Ethan felt the storm inside him begin to settle. There were still questions, still fears, but for the first time, he wasn't facing them alone. With Lyra by his side, he knew he could take that next step, whatever it was. The days that followed seemed like a blur to Ethan. He had finally started to let his guard down around Lyra. They spent more time together, talking about their lives, their cultures, and the things that made them who they were. Every conversation felt like a new discovery. He was learning more about her every day, and he liked what he was learning. But despite the peace that had settled between them, Ethan couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. The connection he had with Lyra was growing stronger, but so was the tension in the air. The world around them felt like it was changing, and he couldn't help but feel like they were on the edge of something that neither of them could control. One evening, while they sat on a balcony overlooking the bustling city, Ethan noticed a group of unfamiliar figures watching them from across the street. Their faces were hard to read, but the way they stared made Ethan uneasy. They didn't look like they belonged in the city. They looked out of place, like they had come from somewhere far away, with purpose in their eyes. Who are they? Ethan asked, his voice low. Lyra turned to look, and her expression shifted. It was subtle, but Ethan noticed it. A flash of concern crossed her face before she masked it with a calm smile. "They're just travelers," she said, but Ethan could tell she wasn't telling the whole truth. "Travelers," he repeated, not convinced. "They don't look like travelers. What's going on, Lyra?" She hesitated for a moment, then sighed. "I didn't want to worry you, Ethan, but the truth is, those people are from a group that doesn't approve of our bond." Ethan frowned. "What do you mean doesn't approve?" "We haven't done anything wrong?" Lyra's eyes darkened. "It's not about what we've done. It's about what they think we're doing. My people have strict customs, and there are factions that believe connections like ours are dangerous. They think we're making a mistake, that we're defying tradition." Ethan's stomach sank. What are they going to do about it? Lyra's voice was filled with an edge of worry. "It won't stop until they force us to break the bond. They'll do whatever it takes to separate us." A chill ran through Ethan. He had feared something like this would happen. There was always a part of him that knew things couldn't be so simple, that something would come to challenge the peace they had found. But he never imagined it would come from Lyra's own people. "We can't just let them do this," Ethan said, standing up, his fists clenched. "We've already been through so much. Why should we let them tear this apart?" Lyra stood as well, her expression serious. "I agree, but they're powerful. They've been watching us for days, waiting for the right moment to act." Ethan's mind raced. He wasn't about to let anyone come between him and Lyra. He had finally started to trust someone again, to feel something real, and he wasn't going to let it slip away. But he knew they couldn't face this threat alone. "Need to get out of here," Ethan said, urgency in his voice. "We can't just stay and wait for them to make a move. We need to find somewhere safe." Lyra nodded, her eyes full of resolve. "I've already made arrangements. We can leave tonight. But we must move quickly. The longer we stay, the closer they get." They moved with haste, gathering their things and preparing to leave. The city, once filled with the hum of life, now felt like a labyrinth of danger. Ethan's heart raced in his chest, but he couldn't focus on that. All that mattered was getting away from the people who wanted to destroy what they had. As they made their way through the quiet streets, Ethan's thoughts turned to the people who were chasing them. Who were they? What would they do if they caught them? He didn't know the answers. But he knew one thing. He wasn't going to let anyone take Lyra away from him. Just as they reached the outskirts of the city, a voice called out from behind. "Them, you can't run forever, Lyra." Ethan's blood ran cold as he turned to see a group of armed figures approaching, their eyes filled with determination. The leader, a tall figure with piercing eyes, stepped forward. "You know what? Must be done. The bond between you and this human cannot be allowed to exist." Lyra's posture stiffened, but she stood her ground. "I will not be controlled," she said, her voice firm. "This is my choice, and I will not back down." The leader sneered. You have no choice in the matter. Your people will not allow this connection to remain." Ethan stepped forward, standing beside Lyra. "You don't get to decide what happens between us. We're not going anywhere." The leader's gaze hardened. "Then you will both suffer the consequences." With a swift motion, the group of figures raised their weapons. Ethan's heart pounded in his chest as he prepared for whatever was coming next. He couldn't let them take Lyra, not after everything they had been through. Just as the tension in the air thickened, a bright flash of light exploded in front of them, sending the group of figures stumbling backward. A sharp voice rang out, "That's enough." Ethan turned, his heart racing as he saw a familiar face stepping into the light, an ally he hadn't expected. A group of soldiers, some human, some alien, had arrived just in time to intervene. They were armed and ready, their presence a clear signal that Lyra's enemies were not going to get their way. The leader of the group sneered. "You think this will stop us?" The soldier in charge stepped forward, a confident smile on his face. "You're outnumbered. And this time, you won't be able to hide behind your traditions. Leave, or we'll make you." The tension in the air was palpable as the two groups stood facing off, but Ethan knew that for the first time in a long while they had a chance. With allies by their side, they could stand their ground. Lyra, Ethan whispered, turning to her, we're not alone anymore. We'll get through this together. Lyra looked at him, her eyes filled with gratitude. Together, she said softly, her hand reaching out to grasp his. Ethan and Lyra sat in a small, light, dimly lit room, the weight of what had just happened pressing heavily on them. The group of soldiers who had arrived just in time had taken them to a safe house, far from the city and its dangers. The soldiers were still on high alert, making sure no one would follow them. But in that moment, Ethan and Lyra were alone, able to breathe again for the first time in days. Ethan leaned back against the wall, running a hand through his hair. His mind was still racing, unable to fully process everything that had happened. They had barely escaped the group that had wanted to break them apart. The fear, the danger had felt real, and the tension was still thick in the air. But now, in this quiet room, it was just the two of them. "How are you holding up?" Ethan asked, his voice softer than us. Yule, Lyra looked up at him, her violet eyes calm and steady. "I'm all right," she said quietly. "I've been through a lot, but I'm stronger than I look." Ethan smiled faintly, but there was a sadness in his eyes. "I'm sorry you had to go through all of that. I never imagined your people would be so determined to separate us." Lyra sighed, her shoulders slumping slightly. "It's not that simple," she said. "In my culture, there are factions that believe strongly in tradition. They think that connections like ours connections between different species could threaten the balance. They believe that we should only bond with our own kind." Ethan frowned. "But that's not fair. It's not right to tell you who you can or can't connect with." Lyra nodded. "I agree, but change is hard, and not everyone is open to it. That's why they've been hunting us, watching our every move. They wanted to stop what we have before it could grow." Ethan looked at her, his heart heavy. He had never considered how difficult it might be for Lyra to stand up for what she believed in. She was strong, brave, but also carrying the weight of her people's expectations. He couldn't imagine how hard it must have been for her to push back against those who wanted to tear them apart. "You don't have to fight this alone," Ethan said, his voice firm. "I'm with you, Lyra, no matter what." She smiled softly, the warmth of it reaching her eyes. "Thank you, Ethan. I never wanted to drag you into this. But now that you're here, I know I don't have to face it alone anymore." They sat in silence for a few moments, the quiet of the room wrapping around them like a blanket. It wasn't that they didn't have more to say. It was that they didn't need to say anything. Just being there with each other felt like enough finally. Ethan spoke up again. "Do you think they'll come after us again?" Lyra looked down, her expression serious. "Yes, they won't give up easily. But we have allies now. The soldiers who helped us, they've been working to protect people like us. They won't let them break us apart. We have a chance, Ethan, but we need to stay strong. We need to keep moving forward." Ethan took a deep breath, feeling the weight of her words. He didn't know what the future held, but he knew one thing for sure: he wasn't going to let fear control his life. He had spent too long running, too long hiding behind walls he had built up around himself. But with Lyra, he felt like he could face anything. Together they could stand against the storm. "We'll face it together," Ethan said, his voice filled with resolve. Lyra nodded, her eyes shining with determination. That's what matters now. As the hours passed, Ethan and Lyra made plans. They talked about where they would go next, how they could stay one step ahead of those who still wanted to tear them apart. Couldn't stay in the safe house forever. They needed to be ready to move, to fight for what they believed in. But no matter what, they were in it together. That night, as they lay in the small room, Ethan couldn't sleep. His mind was still racing, and the weight of everything they had been through pressed down on him. But as he turned to look at Lyra, asleep beside him, something shifted inside him. There was a quiet strength in her, something that made him believe they could get through anything. She had already fought for this bond, and now it was his turn to stand beside her, no matter the cost. As the first light of dawn crept through the window, Ethan knew that the real fight was just beginning. They had no idea what challenges lay ahead, but one thing was certain: they wouldn't face it alone. The bond they shared had already survived so much. Now they would fight to protect it. Together, they could face whatever came next. Ethan finally closed his eyes, the quiet sound of Lyra's breathing a comfort in the darkness. For the first time in a long time, he felt a sense of peace. Whatever the future held, he knew that he wasn't running anymore. He had found something worth fighting for, and he would protect it with everything he had. The sun rose slowly, casting a soft glow over the landscape outside the small, quiet room where Ethan and Lyra had spent the night. The night had been filled with whispers of plans, hopes, and shared dreams. But as the morning light filtered in, everything felt different. The world outside was still dangerous, but inside this room, there was something more powerful than fear-hope. Ethan woke first, his eyes adjusting to the light streaming through the window. He had been awake for a while, lost in his thoughts. The past few days had been a whirlwind of emotions, but one thing stood out above all: the bond he shared with Lyra. No matter the dangers, no matter the challenges ahead, he had made a choice. And that choice was to stand by her side, to fight for something real. Lyra stirred beside him, her peaceful face still soft with sleep. She was a reminder of everything he had gained. The connection between them was undeniable, and though it was still new, it had already shaped the way he saw the world. The walls he had spent so long building up were slowly coming down, and in their place was something stronger, something more lasting. Ethan reached out and gently touched her hand, a small but meaningful gesture. It felt like the right thing to do. Slowly, Lyra's eyes opened, and she met his gaze. Her smile was warm, but there was a quiet understanding in her eyes, as if she knew exactly what he was feeling. "Good morning," she said softly, her voice still carrying the sleepiness of the night, but also a calm that seemed to settle over him. "Morning," Ethan replied, sitting up slightly. "How are you feeling?" Lyra took a deep breath, sitting up beside him. "It's better, but I know this isn't over yet. Still so much to face. But I feel stronger with you here." Ethan nodded, his gaze steady. "Same here. I never imagined things would be this complicated, but I can't back down now. I've made my choice. I'm not going anywhere." She reached out and took his hand, giving it a reassuring squeeze. "Neither am I." They sat in silence for a moment, both of them reflecting on the journey they had already been through. They had faced danger, uncertainty, and the weight of other people's expectations. But through it all, they had found something that was theirs alone. A bond, not just of affection, but of trust, understanding, and shared purpose. After a few moments, Lyra stood up and moved toward the window. She looked out at the landscape, the morning light illuminating her face. There was a sense of calm in her posture, a quiet confidence that had been there since the beginning. Despite everything, she had never once wavered in her belief that their connection was worth fighting for. "We need to move," Lyra said, turning back to face Ethan. "We can't stay here for long. They'll be looking for us." Ethan stood and walked over to her, standing by her side at the window. "I know, but we've got a plan now, don't we?" Lyra nodded, her eyes narrowing slightly with determination. "We do. I've made contact with a few allies. We'll move as soon as the sun is fully up, but we need to stay ahead of them. They won't stop until they tear us apart." Ethan's jaw tightened. The thought of losing Lyra, of having their connection ripped away from them, made his blood boil. But he wasn't afraid anymore. He wasn't going to let anyone take her from him, not after everything they had shared. "I won't let them win," Ethan said, his voice low but firm. "We'll stick together and we'll fight for this. No one's tearing us apart." Lyra's eyes softened as she turned to face him. "I believe you, Ethan. I've never been more sure of anything in my life." With that, they gathered their things. Their plans were set, and as they moved through the small, safe house, they were joined by the group of soldiers who had helped them before. They were ready to leave the safety of the house and continue their journey, knowing that they couldn't afford to stay in one place for too long. They were still in danger, but this time they weren't running from it. They were ready to face it head on as they stepped outside. Ethan felt the weight of the world on his shoulders, but it didn't feel as heavy as it once had. With Lyra by his side, He felt like he could face anything. They had already proven that together they were unstoppable. No matter what came next, they would face it as one. The journey ahead was uncertain. There would be more challenges, more risks, and more enemies to face. But one thing had changed. Ethan had stopped running. He had found something worth fighting for, and he was ready to protect it. As they walked through the early morning light, Lyra's hand in his, Ethan felt a sense of peace settle over him. They didn't know what the future held, but they knew that they could face it together. The bond between them was unbreakable, and nothing could tear them apart. For the first time in his life, Ethan felt like he had found his place in the world. He wasn't just a soldier alone in the galaxy. He was a part of something bigger, something that mattered. And with Lyra by his side, he knew that no matter what the future brought, they would always have each other. Together, they walked forward, ready to face whatever came next. They didn't know what the road ahead would look like, but they knew one thing for sure: they would face it together, and nothing would stand in their way.